All right, listeners. As you all know, sometimes on this podcast, we like to have fun, but we also get into really serious debate, really serious dialogue about really important topics. I have been watching one such debate between Nick and Cameron, and it's gotten a little heated. This is honestly probably the most upset I think I've seen Cameron in the time that I've known him, because he's normally such an even-tempered guy. The debate I'm talking about, of course, is about whether or not Mountain Dew Baja Blast is a good drink.
And it's not.
It is.
It's not.
Well, I'm just like I'm astounded. Like 99.9% of people love this drink, and you're at that 0.1%. You're like the germs on like the hand sanitizer, like that 0.1 that just doesn't get killed. Like it's like if you go to Taco Bell and you don't get Baja Blast, then
why would I get Baja Blast when I get a perfectly good Pepsi?
It's a wasted trip.
Folks, this is what I've been having to deal with for the last 24 hours.
Or just get regular Mountain Dew like an adult.
No, you don't get regular Mountain Dew like an adult. I use that as my mix for whiskey. That's what it's used for. But the thing is, Baja Blast accents well with the food that's available. A Crunchwrap Supreme and a Baja Blast is a god-tier fast food combination.
I don't want the flavors of Taco Bell to be accentuated. I go to Taco Bell when it's like 10 o'clock at night. I don't have any other option.
Taco Bell. When you don't have any other options, we're your people.
You just don't have a refined palate. Like a Crunchwrap Supreme is the greatest invention in fast food history, along with the greatest drink in fast food history, that is Baja Blast.
I don't know, man. I was told a long time ago that Taco Bell loving is Dodger loving, and I don't know if I can abide by that.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know that, so that's out of my lexicon. So I don't really care.
This is just entirely all going over my head right now, folks.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to say is that, Baja Blast is the Donald Trump of sodas.
No, it's not. It's the Hank Aaron of sodas.
Are we? I think we're mixing metaphors here. We're going from Donald Trump to Hank Aaron.
Yeah, because Baja Blast is all what's good about fast food, and Hank Aaron is all that's good about baseball. So that is it. I feel like that's a timely comparison.
As someone who knows very little about either soda or baseball, this is just entirely going over my head
Baja
right
Blast
now.
Is the Joe Louis of sodas.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Someone is making sense here. Damn.
Is the Joe Louis,
the Jake Paul of sodas?
No.
Oh God.
No, your take was the who's a bad boxer?
Well, he thinks about that. Caroline, roll the credits.
Fuck Andrew Jackson.
Fuck Andrew Jackson.
Fuck Andrew Jackson.
Or we're just gonna die like patriots.
There's nothing better. There's no bigger middle finger. Hey, you want to put me in suicide mission? Okay, I'm just gonna keep living.
He clearly figured out how to go Super Saiyan.
He wanted Schmeling dead, but he just wouldn't die.
He was anti-bank, anti-paper money, and he's on the $20 bill.
Nego just comes out of nowhere, soars across the sky.
Welcome back, and Nick's take is Logan Paul of takes in boxing. So that's
Son, step aside. This is how you do it. Welcome back to A Mouthful of History, everybody. I'm Nick. Join with me as always, David.
What's poppin', y'all?
And Cameron.
Hello.
All right. If you remember last time, we took you up to just past the Battle of Algiers in our episode on the Algerian War of Independence, and today we're here to finish that talk.
And we ended on Charles de Gaulle and the creation of the Fifth Republic. So,
actually, real quick, Cameron, do you want to tell us what it means for there to be a new republic?
So a new republic, it means the drafting of a new constitution, the new ways of rule, and it makes de Gaulle kind of like one of the big heads of it, like kind of drafting it around him.
I believe that this new constitution basically put more power in the hands of the president than the previous one did.
Yeah, and I think this one, they really strive to assimilate Algerians. And that first thing he did, before the Constitution was drafted, there was a referendum.
Oh, by the way, for our American listeners out there, yes, other countries do constantly redraft their constitution to better fit a more modern society.
Ours is we cannot touch it. Well, we amend the Constitution, but we don't overthrow the whole thing, which we,
But the last amendment we did was about making sure that Congress people don't pay themselves higher during the time that they're sitting.
And I mean, as much as a piece of crap Thomas Jefferson was, he had it right where the Constitution should be constantly updated and changed. There should be a new Constitution every 20 years. For all of his foibles, that was actually a decent take. So there was a referendum on the new Constitution for the Fifth Republic. And the thing is, it gave a vote to the French people, the people of Algeria, and other people overseas, the right to vote in the Fifth Republic's institutions. So this is like an expansion of voting franchise. The thing is, it was an overwhelming yes, but there was also some foibles. So a journalist, Edward Baer, disagreed because a lot of no votes were thrown away, and a lot of Algerians were like, well, they were herded into voting booths. The no votes were thrown away, and some of the voting booths only had a yes option. I think they were banking on the illiteracy of the Algerian people. It's kind of coordinated yes vote.
And the easiest way to keep people enslaved is to keep any sense of education away from them. Just look at American slavery. We were punished by up to death if you learned to read.
And de Gaulle wasn't stupid. He commuted sentences for FLN detainees to show, like, look at me, I can have clemency on these people and on the Algerians. But the thing is, the communists and other elements of the non-communist left in France voted no because de Gaulle would have too much power. That was the centering of the Fifth Republic, was giving more power to Charles de Gaulle.
So basically, you have him trying to expand his power and trying to manipulate his way into a yes, but he was smart enough to do so with a lot of carrots. Or in other words, he put in a lot of incentives for people. That way they'd say, hey, this de Gaulle guy, kind of corrupt, but at least he's giving us stuff and making things a little better for us.
He may be overrated, but he wasn't dumb.
That's good politics right there.
So the referendum passed with 96%. Overwhelmingly voted yes. The first thing de Gaulle did to re-enfranchise the Algerian people was to create the Constantine Plan. But let's put it this way. The FLN vehemently disagreed on this because they want full independence. So this is kind of like de Gaulle's interlocuteur valable third force way of doing things. So he develops the Constantine Plan. 5-year plan for Algeria. I mean, a lot of countries have 5-year plans, don't they?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, because you can assess things on a bigger scale over 5 years than you can. Like, oh, this is just like our 3-year plan or something like that.
But I almost feel like this 5-year plan's almost like a pejorative in a way because we always analyze Stalin and Mao as 5-year plans. So it's like, oh, this 5-year plan is a thing. But I mean, I guess in the French sense, it's all right.
I wonder if Lenin had lived, if his new economic policy was going to be like a 5-year plan, or if it had more, it was different.
That's a good question.
Basically, it was situated within the yes vote. And so there was no thought of integration or in French Algeria. So the plan would create 400,000 new jobs, house 1 million people, and redistribute 200,000 hectares of land, which seems good on paper. Also, the wage of Algerians would be raised, provide education for 2/3 of Algerians, expand the number of Muslims into the civil services, and develop the Sahara's energy potential for the common good. And finally, de Gaulle gave overtures to the FLN, the Pays de Brave, the brave peace. And it's an honorable truce, offers of amnesty, and an invite to create a democratic solution. So the deal was rejected. So basically, FLN's like, fuck off. So they would create the GPRA, Provisional Government out in Algeria and Tunisia. And they would go on to create the flag of Algeria.
There's no greater symbol for the creation of your country than when you create your own flag.
So they're like, no, de Gaulle, we want full independence. Don't give us this half-hearted assimilation thing. We're still going to be second-class citizens in this regardless. But there was also some muscle involved. This was the Charles Offensive. So this was the muscle part of the Constantine Plan. So it was conducted by General Marie Charles, so one of de Gaulle's right-hand men. He was pro-Algérie Française. And so basically they do scorched earth, and they also recruited Harkies. Harkies is going to be a pejorative term after the war, but these are Algerians who fought for the French during this conflict.
We call those traitors.
So essentially traitors. So they were able to knock out like half of the ALN, the Algerian National Front, which was the kind of the main army, and then the FLN. And so despite the loss, they gained political legitimacy when the Arab states and Asian communist states recognized the GPRA. The global south recognized the legitimate Algerian government in Tunisia.
Again, You can't state enough how bad it is for these countries that they just end up creating their own monsters.
But then de Gaulle. So de Gaulle's trying to be as sympathetic as possible towards the Pied Noir and the Algerians. He's trying to balance two things, which is just impossible.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do that. But then de Gaulle kind of writes, he doesn't write his own death wish, but he does utter these magic words. And David, what were these so-called magic words?
So, after the Constantine Plan was enacted, we see 8,000 hectares of land redistributed, 5,000 public service jobs created, 860,000 Algerian children in schools. De Gaulle then even takes it one step further, and he says, I deem it necessary that recourse to self-determination be here and now proclaimed in the name of France and the Republic. So, he's talking about self-determination for the Algerians now. The GPRA leader, Abbas, he welcomed de Gaulle's idea, and of course, rightfully so, I think, he credited the FLN and the ALN for making this happen, which, again, super reasonable, because if they hadn't been resisting this entire time, they would have been settling for breadcrumbs.
But at the end of the day, the FLN, ALN still want to be the driver's seat with negotiations.
Yeah, so far it seems like all the stuff happening about Algeria has no Algerians actually part of the plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're still trying to find the third force. But then when the word self-determination came out,
The Pied Noir were not happy.
the Pied Noir were like, what the fuck? In the worst way possible. And one of them being Jacques Massou, who led the paratroopers in Algeria because they felt betrayed by de Gaulle because they put him in power, and essentially de Gaulle's quote-unquote turning on them. So he gets interviewed by this newspaper, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, and he says that he felt de Gaulle was to become a man of the left, and the only reason why de Gaulle was called upon to lead because he was the only man available. So then Massou gets relieved of his duties and gets sent to Metz to control another part of the French army in France. So he loses it. Most of all French generals had the same sentiment. They felt betrayed by de Gaulle, but fuck their feelings, am I right?
Fuck them.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
They didn't like the Constantine Plan, and they didn't like the release of FLN prisoners. So there was a rise of popularity for the FLN in Algeria over time. Basically, people hated the forced living conditions on new but terrible camps because of the Shal Offensive. That continues the systematic use of torture.
Remember, not a war.
Gender-specific violence and constant searches by the French military, and 63% of mainland France wanted a ceasefire solution with the FLN. So popular opinion for the FLN was growing. But the thing is, they weren't going to accept their situation. We're not going to be number two, not going to be number two.
We have enough cigarettes and baguettes to keep fighting.
The United French mayors warned people in Nigeria who wished to remain French that they would only defend this right, even taking up arms if necessary. So what happens is Barricades Week. So a bunch of right-wingers, they start occupying Algiers University, led by Pierre Lagaillard and Joe Ortiz. And then police were sent in to stop it, but were fired upon by Europeans in windows and rooftops. And so 14 dead and 143 wounded gendarme police, and 8 killed and 24 wounded on the side of the demonstrators. So basically the Pied Noir started taking up their own guns. It became the okay to kill corral. Because this is some like wild western saloon stuff.
Almost a three-way war, or excuse me, a three-way internal conflict.
I mean, if you look at the total amount of dead and wounded, you can tell the Europeans, the Pied Noir, were the ones who started it. And so de Gaulle masterfully stops this, and no other officer or general joins. And so his words basically save Barricades Week. There was no mutinies. He told the army, what would the French army be but an anarchic and absurd conglomeration of military feudalisms? If it should happen that certain elements made their loyalty conditional. As you know, I have the supreme responsibility. It is I who bear the country's destiny. I must therefore be obeyed. This being said, under the penalty of a serious offense, may associate himself at any time, even passively, with the insurrection. In that last analysis, law and order must be established. Your duty is to bring this about. I am giving this order. So he was able to stop the French military from turning on himself and basically saying, look, Algerians have a right to self-determination, and I am the supreme leader of France, and you are going to listen to me, and there will be consequences. So The perpetrators were sent to prison. They sent to La Sainte prison in Paris. And so basically, de Gaulle is actually quashing a lot of this, right-wing rebellion. And
Wait,
so,
insurrectionists punished for their insurrection?
yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah, nothing's happened as a result of January 6th, too. And there was a lot of opposition to the war in France.
Like you do.
There were networks of French people who were hiding FLN members and smuggling money out of the country to fund the war effort. There was the Janson effort.
Yeah, so one of the most prominent people in the network of people against the French war effort in Algeria was Francis Janson, who did a clandestine press conference in 1960 to denounce the war and support the FLN. He also called on Frenchmen to dodge the draft. This also, a lot of these anti-war efforts help put a sort of spotlight in a positive way, ideally, on the Algerian community in France. In 1954, the population was 211,000, but by 1960, it had grown to 350,000, in large part because a lot of people escaped the forced resettlement by the army. So Johnson created an established network of pro-FLN people to help send money to Algeria through Switzerland, smuggle FLN members, and give arms. And this is basically just called the Johnson Network. So the pro-FLN network was also attracting women as well. You have people like Janine Kahin, who's Jewish, who supported the FLN because she and other people like her saw it as a global fight against oppression for freedom.
Yeah, and so we see the support in these systems beyond Algeria, seeking to help the Algerians, get what they want. De Gaulle, he was in France for a little bit during this time, and so he goes back to Algeria. The FNF and the FAF, they were the right-wing demonstrator groups that had something in Barricades Week, and so they were protesting De Gaulle. But the thing is, on December 11th, 1958, thousands of Algerians took the streets in Oran, Constantine, and Algiers, and they were chanting, "Long live the FLN, long live Abbas, vive De Gaulle, free Ben Bella, Algeria, Algerienne, and Muslim Algeria." So de Gaulle thought that he'd still have an opportunity to have this third force negotiations, but really, the Algerians wanted their own country by now. And an officer told Le Monde, "We have suffered a veritable psychological Dien Bien Phu. On May 16, 1958, we did not have the military situation under control, and everybody shouted, 'Long live France.' Today, we won the military front, and everybody was shouting, 'Long live the FLN.'" So, with the communities in France, and as a result of the Battle of Algiers and the popular opinion of the systematic use of torture being bad, basically, it led to this moment. Also, there was a UN vote.
Oh, yes, the UN. By this point, only, I think a decade or so into their existence.
Yeah, just about. Or just a little bit past a decade, I think. But essentially, yeah, a decade in.
A two-tier League of Nations.
So we have, for the UN vote leading up to it, we have Abbas leading diplomatic missions to Peking and Moscow to court support for the effort. And they actually got military support from China, and from the Soviet Union, they at least got government recognition. The US and the UK, kind of seeing all this happening, wanted to end the war because they believed that French policy was leading the FLN to ally with communist countries. Why the US and British could recognize this in French policy, but not their own policy, is, I guess, a topic for another time. So you have these leaders from Algeria making regular appearances in African countries and even on the media. Abbas was on CBS for an hour, for example. And all of this paid off because the UN voted to endorse Algeria's right to independence in 1960. There were 63 votes to 8 against and then 27 abstentions.
Yeah. Was this one of those non-binding resolutions?
It wasn't specified, but with the UN being pro-Algerian independence, this was kind of it's going to happen, but when? That's the question.
Yeah.
It was non-binding, but it was the court of world opinion.
Yeah, and then as a result, the FNF and the FAF create the OAS, the biggest pieces of shit in all of this because they can't take the L.
Yeah, think about how shitty so many of the French-related groups have been as we've told this story. And Cameron's telling you, these are the worst of the worst.
Yeah, and so it was created by one French general nicknamed the Mandarin, Raoul Salan, who was also leading troops during the Battle of Algiers. They were pro-French Algeria, and La Gaillarde and Susini, they jumped prison. So they come back to Algeria. The tactics were terrorism with an ideology that was anti-Gaullist, anti-communist, and anti-Algerianism with racial superiority. Whew, I mean...
A French KKK, basically.
A French KKK that was like, oh, we don't want to take the L. We're going to be racist as fuck. Like, it's really just a lost cause at this point.
So this is almost like if in the U.S. after the end of the Civil War, Reconstruction had continued, but the South still rose up against the freed people of color in the South anyway.
Basically, if John Wilkes Booth's idea that assassinating the president would actually mobilize the South again actually kind of went through.
Yeah, imagine like John Wilkes Booth trying to create something before Appomattox Courthouse, and it is trying to like do something, and then when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments happen, like, yeah, they start to like blow stuff up.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so they wanted to try to break negotiations between the FLN and the French. They wanted to try to provoke the FLN into fighting, but the FLN, with their resolve, do not, because they know the popular support is on their side. They don't need to do anything anymore.
Yeah, they've won at this point. Like, it's just a matter of everybody else realizing, yep, it's over.
But the thing is, though, a lot of the French military had support for the OAS, and they even tried to have their own putsch against de Gaulle between April 21st through 26th, 1961, formed by Salin, Edmond Jouhot, André Zeller, and Maurice Chal, who the Chal Offensive was named after. So they didn't like that one of de Gaulle's political friends, Michel Debré, was holding secret negotiations with the FLN. So at first, it came in two phases. First, paratroopers would jump and land on airfields near Algiers, Oran, and Constantine, and they would take control of the cities by Colonel Antoine Augout. The paras would arrest de Gaulle. De Gaulle's in Algeria, General Fernand Gambier, and the commander-in-chief, and Jean Morin, the delegate general. But of course, this doesn't happen. So the use of conscripts and transistor radios, they listen to Gaulle's speech and they resist joining the putsch. The majority of the military were like, no, we can't do this, fuck that. And so Jouhot and Salin escaped while Chal and Zeller handed themselves over.
I think the French generals really underestimated how much like political clout de Gaulle had with the people at that point.
But it's just like France almost developed into some feudal state. A lot of generals felt betrayed by de Gaulle, but for all the wrong reasons. Like, oh, we're here to keep Algeria French, but de Gaulle's not letting us do that anymore, so what's the point of our job? So that means they were hell-bent on trying to get him out of power, but that doesn't happen because they lost, and they take the L, and they fess up to their crimes, only some of them. And so we get to the Avion Accords. These are the negotiations. There's a lot that happened, but basically Algerians got their independence, and so they did it. I mean, David, you want to talk about how the FLN got negotiations like in the upper hand?
Yeah, so there were tons of people protesting in the streets in support of the FLN and Algerian independence. And it had just reached such a breaking point of popular opinion that there was just no turning back.
The negotiations are actually going pretty well for the Algerians, but then the OAS start to resume bombings. One guy named Bastien Thierry almost blew up de Gaulle on Pont-sur-Seine in Paris. He was executed. Jean-Paul Sartre was almost blown up by the OAS too.
I thought you were about to say he was going to blow someone up.
Basically, their tactic was any Arab will do, even though de Gaulle and Sartre are not Arabs. So they took their tactics from the FLN, Viet Minh, the French army. Basically, they started to recruit the most scummiest of people.
Just anyone that's willing to murder and put down an independence movement.
Hey, were you willing to kill Algerians for no fucking reason?
And so some people even were not like anti-Semitic, but they just wanted to be pro-French Algeria. And one guy, Jean Guénassier, said, it was necessary to hold your nose and close your eyes a little. The OAS included a lot of anti-Semites who in the name of the Fraternity of Arms made the Celtic cross on the barricades. I avoided looking at them deep down. They were the children of those who had elected anti-Semites Regis and Drumont and those who applauded Vichy.
So basically they're just like, wow, man, in this, for some reason, in this violent anti-freedom movement, they were racists. Who could have possibly guessed?
It's like, yeah, I want French Algeria, but I got a lot of racists over here. Like, I got to turn the cheek against these guys.
Right?
Like,
Maybe I should evaluate my life choices if these are the people I'm fighting alongside.
But then they lost a lot of popular support over the incident of Delphine Reynaud.
So the OAS tried to kill the culture minister Andre Malraux, who was also a friend of de Gaulle. But the thing is, he left his room and a girl was like, a bomb blew up in her face and her face was ripped in half.
Yeah, once your military plan fails and you just kill children at that point, you basically lose all support you had up to that point.
So the French people started chanting OAS assassins. So basically, any hope of them trying to break negotiations are over. But the agreement was reached, and Algeria got their independence.
Whoop, whoop.
Woo!
Let's go.
Let's go.
Party.
I hate to bring them up again, but the OAS just can't take the L. But here was kind of the fucked up thing. They started going after the Algerian intelligentsia.
So they're just firing blindly into a crowd, essentially, at this point.
They're firing blindly into a crowd.
Everybody else is going home. We're like, okay, Algeria, there you go your separate ways. France, we're gonna go our separate ways. It's over, we're done. And here's the OAS, just like, no, man, we can still win this. All the planes are flying off. The ships are departing back to their bases and stuff like that. No, we still got this.
We just need to be more racist and more violent.
They decided, well, if the Algerians want us out, then we'll just destroy everything we made. So that meant schools, universities, hospitals, clinics. Like, really, they wanted to destroy everything before they left. And there was
just pure loser energy.
And so they...
Small dick energy.
They clashed with the police at the Battle of Bab al-Oued. And the police arrested 3,309 pieds noirs of the OAS and OAS sympathizers. And Raoul Salan and Edmond Jouhot were arrested. Sousini does reach an agreement with the provisional government of Algeria, and he leaves. And so, yeah, they destroyed libraries, schools, and hospitals. But the thing is, de Gaulle wanted an exodus over time. But the Pied Noir felt that they weren't safe. And so they just go on this, like, Black Friday exodus from the country. But there was also the Jews, who were generally split, because some Jews supported the FLN, and some Jews supported the Pied Noir. So they split because some of the left and the intelligentsia supported the FLN, and there was still a lot of right-wing Jewish people who supported Algérie Française. Majority felt they were Republicans at heart, like they had more French leanings than FLN Algerian leanings. So they have a mass exodus from Algeria that, despite having ancestry in Algeria since the Reconquista in 1492, they majority leave the country. And then there was also the Harkis. So let's go back to them. So they were traitors. And
yeah, just to reiterate, the Harkis were the Algerians who fought on the side of the French.
So basically the French army left them to their own devices. They didn't integrate them into their country. And ultimately, the FLN went on some campaigns to kill the Harkis. Because de Gaulle, at the end of the day, wasn't pro-Algerian nor pro-Muslims. We cannot agree to take all Muslims who come here declaring that they do not agree with the Algerian government. The term repatriate obviously does not apply to Muslims. They are not returning to the land of their fathers. In their case, they would be refugees.
That's such a dick move. Oh, hey, thank you for helping us try to keep your people subjugated. By the way, good luck.
Right? I don't have a ton of sympathy for the Harkis, but if you're going to employ native folks against their own people, at least have their backs, you imperialist dipshits.
It just shows that they didn't care all along. They just wanted to keep Algeria French, and whatever happened to the Algerians and the Berbers and the Muslims, they didn't do anything. Yep. They weren't going to do anything for them. But then there was also later events that emerged. So there was a general who was also a piece of shit named Paul Assorez. And in 2000, he wrote a book saying that he admitted to using torture, but it was ordered from the high levels of French government. And the French government really tried to suppress him. He claimed that torture was ordered at the highest levels of French government. He defended the use of it.
Yeah, it is. It was, because having seen his interview, it was interesting because he kind of alternates between saying, well, it was ordered by the higher ups. We were just following orders. We didn't have a choice. But then also, oh, but it was super cool that they did that.
The Human Rights Watch pressured Jacques Chirac, who was the president at the time in 2000, to charge him with war crimes. And so basically, Assorez was fined 7,500 euros, and his two publishers, Pion and Perrin, were fined 15,000 euros each. Basically, the French government won out. Supposedly, quote unquote, win, even though you could get the book still nowadays.
Yeah, that'll show him.
The Court of Cassation declared in its judgment that the freedom to inform, which is the basis of freedom of expression, does not lead to accompany the exposure of facts with commentaries justifying acts contrary to human dignity and universally reproved, nor does it glorify its author. It's kind of a convoluted statement, but
yeah, that's a whole lot of nothing in that statement.
yeah,
that's what you expect from these big bodies like that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of high-minded rhetoric with platitudes that basically mean nothing.
I think we can take from this is that in majority of revolutions on this earth, violence was necessary. Like the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Algerian Revolution, and even in the French Indochina War. Like there is a point where that violence had to be used.
It is interesting we live in a world that says that, you know, if someone commits a minor crime, harsh, just really punitive measures are okay. We live in a country that allows the death penalty for sometimes minor crimes, but if someone is oppressing your entire group of people, all of a sudden people become Gandhi when you talk about how they're supposed to respond.
People have no concept of like the history of struggle for revolution and just for self-determination. When you have been oppressed by a single group for hundreds of years, I'm sorry, you don't have happy feelings about that.
This wasn't like wanton violence. Like the Algerians were frustrated because every attempt to go through the quote-unquote proper channels were rebuffed by every corner.
Just absolutely stonewalled.
Yep.
They would get stonewalled. So guess what? The FLN is created. And through armed struggle, they were able to get on the front foot negotiations against the French at Evian.
It also must be said, too, because we talked about the armed struggle. We also talked about nonviolent labor uprisings. And when that happened, the French retaliated, even though, again, you know, a general strike is not a violent move. And so for someone who might be listening and thinking to themselves, oh, you know, but are we sure that violence was the only way? Look at the suppression, the murder that occurred when they did try nonviolent tactics such as labor strikes.
Yeah, they just got hit with more violence.
Yeah, and Algeria is one of the least talked about revolutions nowadays. The Wars of Independence. Like, this was a pretty bloody conflict. Like, over 1 million people died in 8 years.
That is not small potatoes.
No.
And it shows that a lot of it the French did to themselves. I think the use of torture really shifted the popular opinion to be on the side of the FLN.
You know, James Baldwin actually has this quote, and it wasn't about Algeria, but I think it applies really well. And I don't remember it verbatim, but he basically says, when a system is losing legitimacy, and even the people enforcing that system start to not believe in it anymore, they try to compensate for that with just cruelty. And I think you kind of see that happening here. You know, maybe the French, through their own twisted imperialist logic, kind of thought, oh, we're doing the Algerians a favor. But the more the Algerians resisted and the less they could lie to themselves, the more you see this cruelty and inhumanity start to manifest in order to retain what they thought was theirs, but was, of course, the Algerian people's.
And de Gaulle saw that writing on the wall as well, no matter how many times he sought to stop that. He wanted the French to be the main negotiators, to have the front foot, but he knew the writing was on the wall.
He was very astute. He was an astute politician.
But then even he realized the jig was up. So Algeria is able to gain their independence, and while Algeria has not been smooth sailing for the past 30 years, we have to respect countries' rights to self-determination.
Countries need to have the right to, like I said, self-determination. They need to be able to fail and learn how to pick themselves up.
Yeah, everyone has the right to their own mistakes. And of course, it must be said that it is also very likely that Algeria has, as we do to a lot of emancipated, you know, countries in the global south after they've won independence, probably been, I don't want to say sabotaged, but not given a lot of the chances that they could have otherwise been given.
With the Algerian War of Independence, the FLN did what they could, and there was a lot of French errors, but that helped their cause, like torture and de Gaulle warming up to self-determination. And then you had popular support in France, of course, and you had dumbass OAS like trying to blow everything up. And so then it was only a matter of time And when revolution starts, you can't put that back in the bottle.
That's right. And speaking of revolution, just to wrap things up, our next episode will be about the rare case of a nonviolent revolution in Guatemala, but also the U.S. overthrowing that nonviolent revolution.
So thank you, David. We'll be doing Guatemala next. After that, I believe it's our talk on
The plagues.
the plagues. Yeah, I know. We're kind of a little late to the...
We also gotta say that this is Caroline's episode.
Yeah, this is like episode Caroline pitched to us.
Shout out to Caroline.
Shout out to Caroline.
And then after that, we'll do our usual movie review before we reset the cycle all over again.
And we'd like to thank our patrons. So we'd like to thank Estefania, Zakia, Alex Millage, Sonia Hollingsworth, Giovanni Franco, and Lene.
Be on the lookout for more stuff. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for waiting for us to come back. And you guys all have a great day.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
Mouthful of History out.